All right, we are here. This is going to be part two of me breaking down Simon Sinek speech to a graduating class. In the first episode, we talked about the opening and all the awesome things he did in his opening and how we would tweak it to make it even better for people like us, normal human beings who aren't the Simon Sineks of the world. What we could learn from that and the tactics of uncertainty, creating that aha moment, and then having that nice little slogan to like exclamation at the end. And now we're going to see what else comes up. I haven't watched this, so this is just me noticing things right off the bat. So he just said, focus on the bagel.
So a few years ago, I was watching on TV the London Olympics. And I realized, I sort of noticed.
Again, using uncertainty to create interest. Because you're like, okay, where are you going with this? And the more you are trying to figure out where someone is going, the more you have to listen. At this point, we should also talk about how he is using silence. And then here's something I want you all to understand. Silence is like putting an exclamation point on something. So when you have silence, if you were going to write out your speech, right? Wherever you would put an exclamation point or wherever you'd underline or bold or whatever because it's really important, that would be, then you keep going. 2 seconds of silence. Watch how often he does this to like put an exclamation point.
All of the journalists would ask all of the athletes the same question. Were you nervous or are you nervous? And astonishingly, all the athletes gave the exact same answer. No, I was excited. In other words, if you think about what the characteristics of nervousness is, right? What are the characteristics of nervousness are? I should probably get my grammar right too.
Yeah, come on, Simon.
Like yourselves.
You know, when I was learning how to become a speaker, one of the things I did is I started taking improv classes because one of the things they teach you in improv is that mistakes are gifts. When you make a mistake, it's usually the funniest, most relaxing part of your whole speech. You might be like, oh, I made a mistake, but usually that's when everyone giggles. And then you'll probably make a callback to it, like you'll refer to it later to get another laugh. Mistakes are gifts. Notice that he makes a mistake, but he keeps going with it, and it becomes a super fun thing.
I know you thought it.
And he's playing with it now, you see?
Subject verb agreement, Simon. I got it.
Again, playing with it.
So if you think about what the characteristics of nervousness are, right? Your heart starts pounding, your hands may get a little clammy, you start thinking ahead about what will happen. Well, what are the characteristics of excitement? Your heart starts pounding, your hands may get a little clammy, you start looking forward to what may happen. In other words, it's the exact same thing. And what these elite athletes had done, either naturally or they trained themselves to do, was to interpret nerves as excitement.
One.
So, of course, I tested it. I was on a plane, and it got really bumpy. And I gripped the seat, and I got nervous. And I said out loud to myself, this is exciting.
And notice, we're in the story with him, right? But we still don't know what the point is. Most people will be like, and now I'd like to talk about blah, 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 and then start talking about it. And yeah, that's appropriate for certain kinds of speeches. But if we are trying to be good storytellers, notice that if you don't know where you're going, you're on the journey with him because you don't know what the end is. So now you have to stay on the journey to find out what the end is.
I felt fine. So you're going to face some of the biggest challenges of your life as you go forward. You think this was the hard stuff. This was the easy stuff. So before you see anything, as you're going for your bagel, and you start to get nervous, just
see the callback? It makes a little callback. That's something comedians do all the time. When they have a little bit, like a section that has a joke in it, they'll make a little callback to those sections to kind of make us feel, because you as the audience, we're now all in on an inside joke. So you have that group sense of now we're all kind of doing something together. It breaks the barrier.
Just remind yourself, this is exciting. Perspective matters.
2 seconds of silence at the end. Perspective matters. Let's count it.
perspective matters. The United States Navy.
That was 3 seconds. Again, notice it's at the end. You're like, okay, now I see it. Now I see where you're going. I see. I see what that story was about. That, I see it, is that little satisfaction made the uncertainty useful. If he hadn't had that and he just had uncertainty, you'd get confused and you stop listening. But because you know there's going to be a moral at the end, and now he's established 2, now in this third one, now you're like, okay, where are you going with it now? We get more and more engaged. Silence, exclamation point.
SEALs are considered one of the most elite forces in the world, one of the highest performing groups of people on the planet. To become a Navy SEAL, they have to go through something called BUDS, which is a multi-month selection process which destroys their bodies, and the vast majority of people will drop out and never become SEALs because it is so aggressive. A former SEAL was asked, what kind of person makes it through BUDS? And the SEAL responded,
are you noticing all the little pauses he makes? This is another point. You can't really practice this. I mean, you can practice it, but this is a personality aspect. If you can do it though, it's amazing. And I will give you a strategy on how to like start training yourself. Because I believe that being confident is a series of physical actions. I'll tell you the strategy after this. But watch how often he goes William Shatner, Captain Kirk. Every word is its own sentence. And then all of a sudden he does a whole bunch of words as one sentence. It's like if you watch a heart attack and it looks like this. That's what the speed of a presentation should be like, because that verbal diversity. How do we practice that if we're not good at it? I will tell you in a minute. First, watch it a little bit.
I can't tell you the kind of people that make it through, but I can tell you the kind of people that don't make it through. He said the preening leaders who like to delegate everything, none of those guys make it through. He said the star college athletes who've never really been tested to the core of their being, none of those guys make it through. He said the guys that show up with bulging muscles covered in tattoos who want to show everybody how tough they are, none of those guys make it through.
At this point, he'll change, because here's another strategy that he's using. It's a repetition strategy where you repeat a sentence in the same format. These guys didn't make it through. These guys didn't make it through. These guys, and you're with it, didn't make you. We all know where it's going. They'll do 3 usually. You can do 2 as well. That's another little strategy. So if we were going to present, let's say let's say we're in sales and we have to present whether we should focus on, let's say we're in pharmaceutical sales, and should we focus on trying to connect with the doctors in this city or in that city, right? We say, these doctors all work alone. These doctors don't like talking to people. These doctors, I'm just using a repetition strategy. That's just a way to, if you want to, without getting into a lot of detail, creating a picture in someone's head and really emphasizing a point.
He said some of the guys who become SEALs are skinny and scrawny. He said some of the guys
Again,
who
repetition.
become SEALs, you will actually see them shivering out of fear. He said, but there's one thing
he did 2 on this one.
Have in common.
Boom.
He said when they're emotionally exhausted, when they're physically exhausted, when they have absolutely nothing left to give,
You see? 1, 2, 3. He was paralleling.
every single one of them is able to dig down deep inside of themselves to find the energy to help the guy next to them. Those are the guys that become SEALs. In other words, the highest performing teams on the planet, they're not the strongest, they're not the smartest, they're not the fastest.
Do you see how many times he is paralleling things? He's grouping the same sentence structure. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom.
The highest performing teams on the planet are the ones who give to each other selflessly. They commit themselves to taking care of each other. And this is what makes a great team. Never forget, you are here because someone took care of you, and you have a responsibility to take care of others. This is what makes you great. This is the core of leadership.
So in that section, there was a lot of repetition of a sentence structure. Not just, people think of repetition as repeating words, but there was repetition of sentence structures. And you can go back and check that out. Now let's get into that little strategy about how you can do what Simon Sinek does and inspire people with the words that you use by having, see what I'm doing here? Verbal diversity. It's really easy. Here's the thing, man. I can't speak like you can't speak like me, we can't speak like Simon. But what we can do is have the tool of a diversity in the speed of which we talk and the way you practice that to find out how you do it. Because Simon Sinek does it one way, I do it another. Both are equally valid because that's the way we talk. So here's what you have to do the next time you have to speak. When you are practicing your speech, practice it once, twice, 3, 4 times, 5 if you want to be crazy, at one speed. Then practice the same speech 5 other times at a different speed. So one time you're going to do your whole speech like this to try and be really energetic and to really get people pumped up and raise the roof, and you really want to speak as fast as you can. And the next time you do the whole speech again, but this time much slower. And then the third time you do it in between. And what's going to happen is this. You will start noticing that you will say stuff at a certain speed and you really like the way that worked. And then even when you try and do it other ways, you'll still fall back to that. So if you rehearse at like 4 different speeds, by the time you actually have to do this for real, you're going to start using all 4 of those speeds depending on the section because you like the way something sounds in that speed. And you won't have to think about it. You'll just notice it happens. Only if you practice at one speed a bunch of times and then another speed a bunch of times. Because when you do that, you are creating the mental muscle memory of that speed. Thank you. Thank you. I think this is where we'll end off for this. I don't know what he sounds like he's done, but there's like 23 more minutes left in this speech. So I'm going to end this off for part 2. What did we learn in part 2? 3 things. Something important. 2 seconds of silence. Repetition of a sentence structure. The biggest guys, they didn't make it. The toughest guys, they didn't make it. I'm not repeating a word, I'm repeating the structure of the sentence. They look after each other. They talk to each other. They repeating a sentence structure. And lastly, practice your speech at different speeds, not to find the right way, but to create the muscle memory of doing it many different right ways. All right, so next time,